Okay, and I'm back. You might see this guy, and this is an old relic. Well, I shouldn't say old relic, but my grandmother. This was my grandmother's beloved KitchenAid stand mixer. And it is very, very, very much loved. I don't use this mixer all that often unless I'm doing like a really small amount of stuff. I use mine, which is back here, but I decided, you know what, we're going to cream the butter and the eggs and stuff. We're going to mix that in here. I want to make this simple as possible, so what we're going to do is we're going to use the mixer. And I'm just putting my sugar in with the flour, and I'm just going to take my hands and just mix this a little bit. Now, reading the recipe, I'm going to put this, I got to put the milk back in. Okay, it says mix the sugar and the butter together well until they form a rough cream. So, I'm going to dump the sugar into the mixer. And I got to get my butter out of the refrigerator. Now, this recipe calls for 1 stick. I'm going to use 1.5 sticks of butter. And you can use the salted butter or the unsalted butter. The recipe doesn't specify which, but if you use the salted butter, you don't need to put as much salt in the recipe. And I'm actually going to soften these just a little bit. And my yeast is proofing so nicely in the toaster oven that it'll be ready by the time we get ready for this recipe. Yeah, that's perfect. That's softened. 25 seconds is about all you need to do to soften butter. I'm going to tilt that up. I keep forgetting this is a tilt head and not a... I'm used to mine being an up and down stand mixer. I'm going to be careful because I grab some of this and I want to get all of this in here. You also want to be careful and don't do like I just did, but fortunately I haven't mixed anything. Is a little bit of the paper ripped, so I there's paper actually in the bowl right now, and I need to just grab the end of it. And I'm going to use my spatula and turn to make sure that I grabbed it all, and I think, yeah, I did. Okay. Yeah, I did. I'm going to put that up there. And then I'm just going to gently take half of this one. Now, you are going to need more butter than just the one stick. You're going to need maybe a quarter more of the butter because you're going to, after the dough is rested for 45 minutes, you're going to need to grease whatever sheet you use, whether it be a 9x13 or a cookie sheet. You're going to need to grease it with butter. It's very important to use butter and not use anything like an olive oil or anything of that. That'll just give your coffee cake a little bit richer flavor, but it will also prevent your coffee cake from getting too brown on the bottom, and it'll help cook the crust or the dough on the bottom side as well as the top. So I'm just going to set the butter in for a bit because you want the butter to be nice and hard. You don't want melted butter when you grease the pan. So I'm just going to cream the butter and the sugar. and make this into a cream. And it says a rough cream, so I'm going to pick you guys up and show you what a rough cream looks like. That's about what a rough cream looks like, and I'm going to move the head so you guys can see better view. So that's what they consider a rough cream, and that's all you really need to do. And sorry, I'm going to angle you guys back so you can see this. Okay. Oh, and I got to get going because my I'm looking at my yeast. My yeast is rising to the top. So now we need to get the eggs. I'm going to be off camera for a second, but you'll hear me. And I'm glad I'm doing this now because next week, come Labor Day weekend, we're supposed to go back into the 90s for 5 straight, or for at least 3 of the days. For starting on Saturday. Saturday, Sunday, and Monday are going to be really, really, really hot days. So my husband and I probably will definitely start working on the kitchen more and getting the kitchen taped off and actually starting to paint on next week. So it wants pour the milk mixture and eggs into the flour, mixing well. So now what we're going to do is we are going to actually add our eggs. And like I said, this takes 4 eggs. You can double it. I'm going to only add, I think I'm going to start with 5 eggs. Because like I said, I think if I put 8 eggs in, I think that's just too much eggs. And I'm not really doubling the recipe. I'm just adding a little bit more ingredients. So there's our first egg. And I gotta move you guys up. Unfortunately, you guys are, again, where I normally put you. 2, 3, 4, and there's 5. I'm gonna move you guys again. And I'm looking. Oh, I'm at 8 minutes. Okay. So, let me wash my hands. It's very important that you wash your hands when you're working with eggs. And again, that comes down to poultry. Anything you work with poultry or anything, you definitely want to make sure you have clean surface and everything. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to clean the sides of the bowl. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start alternating the flour and the yeast. And I need to go get the yeast. I'll be right back. And you can see that the sponge has risen, and I'm going to kind of show you. Now it's a little hard to see when you got plastic on it, but you can tell that the yeast has risen. So now what we're going to do is we're going to alternate between adding the flour and adding the yeast mixture. I'm going to stop the video for a second. I'll pick it right back up. I'll be right back. Okay, and I'm back. Sorry about that. The video was getting a little bit long. So, like I said, I got the yeast mixture, and I'm going to put that off to the side for right this second. I'm going to actually stir this in. I'm going to pour the first cup of flour into the bowl. And I'm just going to let that stir. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pour our yeast mixture in. And again, don't forget to scrape out all of the yeast out of your measuring bowl. And I always suggest doing, if you're doing breads or pizza or anything that uses yeast, always use a good measuring cup, preferably one that's tall, and you'll have amazing results. So now that that's incorporated, and this is what I meant when I said my kitchen's a little bit tight. What we're going to do is we're going to add in a cup at a time of our flour, and we're going to mix with each additional use. And then we're going to use a little bit of the milk. And you always want to make sure, especially if you're using a kitchen stand mixer, to stay on the stir level. You do not want to go past the stir level for the KitchenAid. So don't go into 1, 2, 3, 4 settings, because what can happen is you can actually blow out the motor, and you don't want to ruin an expensive KitchenAid. And especially if you have the classic or the older models, they can handle flour, but this one cannot handle the amount that my 6-quart can handle. But this one is able to do a pretty good amount of flour. It can handle probably about 6 to 7 cups of flour with ease. Any more than 7 cups of flour on the classic, I would have to go into the big boy, and the big boy can easily handle 13 cups of flour. So I put the last of my milk in there, and I'm just going to add a little bit more flour to this. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's not struggling, but it is getting to the point where I've added about as much flour to this as I can, and I'm just going to add a little bit more flour. Okay, so now that this bowl is empty, I'm just going to take a paper towel and I'm going to kind of do this. I gotta stop the video for a second. I'll be right back. Okay, and just like that, I'm back. I've let the dough knead, and I'm gonna bring you guys. Oops, dough is so heavy. I'm gonna bring you guys in so you guys can see this. This is what the dough looks like. And it's a wet dough, and unfortunately, because it's so heavy, the tilt model is gonna want to tilt back in, but actually it's holding. I need to scrape that. And let me do that right now. I'm just gonna scrape this down. If your dough looks like it's really, really wet, what you might want to do is you might want to just add a little bit of flour. Now this coffee cake has a fairly moist dough, meaning that you're not going to make the dough so dry like you would for a bread or the Hoska. You want a little bit wetter of a dough because that's actually going to make a really, really, really good coffee cake. Now, if it's too wet, if it's actually runny, then you're going to go ahead and add a little bit more flour to it. Now, the one thing I didn't do, and I sort of forgot this one because this recipe does not call for it, but you can add a little bit of lemon peel. And I think we're going to do that with this. I'm going to move this off to the side. To it, and that's just going to give it a little bit more flavor. Oh, there we go. And I apologize for that. It's been a minute since I've used my grandmother's KitchenAid stand mixer. That's not something I use all the time. So I'm just going to go into my refrigerator, and I'm going to grab a lemon, and we're just going to give it a little bit of lemon zest. And I usually do this for the coffee cake, especially if I'm doing a Hoska, sometimes with the donuts, although I don't think the donuts require lemon zest, but it just will add a nice, kind of a nice flavor, and it'll complement the plums. So, these are small lemons. This is a fairly small lemon. It's not a great giant one. If you have a really big lemon, then I would have maybe a quarter to a half. If you have a small lemon, it's personal preference. You could use half the lemon. You could use the whole lemon. It's just up to you on how much you do. And I think that'll be more than sufficient. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, I think I'm going to grab my new wooden spoon, and I'm just going to mix this a little bit. I probably should have used my spatula, and I think that's what I'm going to actually use, and put that in the sink and like that. So, and then you just want to, you don't really want to knead this too much, because if you overwork the dough, what tends to happen is you tend to have a chewier, you tend to have a much chewier coffee cake. And yeah, that looks perfect. So what I'm going to do is, and there is no kneading for this dough. If you mix it on the mixer for a couple of minutes, that's all you really need to do. You don't want to overwork this. Okay, we're going to cover the dough with a cloth, and we're going to let it sit in a warm place for about 45 minutes. So, what I'm actually going to do, and you don't have to transfer it to another bowl, that's personal preference. I'm just going to drop my knife. I'm just going to transfer this into a bigger bowl, and that way we can see what it does. Sometimes if you leave it in the 5-quart mixing bowl sometimes what happens is it'll start climbing out of the bowl at 45 minutes. So I just, I'm going to take all of this goodness out. I'm going to lift you guys up and actually show you this so you guys see what we're working with. And you might wonder how I'm going to function if I do get rid of the island. Well, when that time comes, I would put a much larger island in the center of the room. But that's what the dough is going to look like for right now. So what you're going to do is you're going to cover it. And I've got my Glad wrap right here. And again, we've talked about, and what I usually do with this is sometimes you can actually, this right here for 1 second. I'm just going to spray it with a little bit of spray. And make sure if you're using spray on your plastic wrap, make sure that it's not a flavored spray. So you don't want to do one of the garlics, otherwise you'll ruin a good coffee cake topping. And I'm just going to set this in. And then with a couple of towels, and these may not look clean, but they are. I'm just going to put one in here. And since my stove is already on, I don't really need to cover the whole bowl. But what you are going to want to do is you are going to want to rotate it. And I don't know if we ever spend time talking. You know, you've heard me. All stoves, and I'm going to angle you, and I'm sorry I'm holding you at a weird angle because that's the camera. Back here, where my hand is where the vent for the oven, when the oven is on, comes out. And it's very hot right here. So what you can do, if you don't have a warm area of your house to put doughs, is you can gently set your bowl next to it. Don't put it over where the heat comes on, because then what happens is you'll really heat up one side of the bowl. So what I do, I'm going to move this over here for a second, is I either put it kind of in front or off to the side. And then what you want to do about every 15 to 20 minutes, and sorry, you got to move you guys so I'm on camera. About every 15 to 20 minutes, you're going to rotate the bowl. And when I say rotate, you're just going to give the bowl a little bit of a turn so that that one spot isn't always so hot. And you're just going to let that sit for about 45 minutes to even 1 hour. You want it to double in size. In the meantime, I'm going to stop the video. I need to replace the battery in the camera because I'm almost out of battery. I'm going to clean up the kitchen, let this rise. I'm actually going to go mow the grass. I'm going to mow at least the front yard, and then we'll check this when I get done. And then we'll get going on the plum coffee cake. So I'll be back in a bit. Stay tuned.